Okay. So today we're going to go over this patch, Night Lights, and we're going to start with the guitar here. Before I get into it, let me kind of turn off this pad, and I'm actually going to turn up the lights so we can see a little bit. We'll get back to a kind of darker scene towards the end again. And yeah, we're going to start with the guitar. I'm not using any pedals or anything. It's just a direct input into Mutable Instruments ears, which is a kind of input module. It controls the amplification. It can provide a little bit of drive, like a kind of analog drive. It also has both a envelope follower and a gate detection circuit, which is super useful for blending the kind of sound of the guitar with the other modules in my rack. So first of all, without the envelope follower, we're just going to unplug that. And without the gate detection, can unplug that. We can hear a little bit about how ears sounds just on its own. It's going to be sending its direct kind of audio rate guitar signal into Mutable Instruments Plaits, which is a dual multimodal filter. Plaits is really cool because you can use it for kind of two separate filters, and I'm going to be doing that with this particular patch. The guitar is going to be on kind of side 2 of Plaits. And so it gets the input of the guitar, and then I'm going to see if I can turn down some of its drive here, which controls how much wave filtering is happening, to hear a little bit about how this guitar sounds just vanilla. And, you know, if you crank up ears, you can get, turn down FX Aid. So you can get a little bit of drive from ears. This is kind of where I have it. See, it has a bit of crunch on it, but the main thing I do on Plaits to start to get this guitar tone is turn up the drive. And then throughout the track, I actually select different, it has a notch filter here. And so right now it's kind of in a mid-range. You can crank this up a little bit more to get different textures, from emphasizing kind of the super crackly high range to a kind of buzziness of the guitar. We start with the kind of main body of the guitar sounding like this. And it's not that interesting yet. When we plug in the envelope follower, what this is doing is it's being sent to Kinks, to the sign section up here, and it's going to be inverted. So typically the envelope follower is going to be the highest range when the guitar is the loudest. But in this case, I'm inverting it, so the envelope follower is lowest when the guitar is loudest, specifically at the start of a pluck. And what that's going to do is it's actually changing the notch filter's primary frequency. So when the pluck is the loudest, it's almost as if this knob in the middle of Plaits is going to be turned down and then come back up as the guitar gets quieter, which gives you this kind of like wah-wah effect. Let's do a loud. This up a little bit more. See how it's almost like ducking at the start of this? And then the buzziness comes in later. We can hear this wah-wah if we turn this knob to the mid-range. I'm going to be playing up here a little bit. You can really hear it on these notes, where it starts very kind of low and then the frequency kind of ramps up on the filter. And if you play quietly, we're not going to be triggering the envelope follower very much at all, so the kind of full frequency or the standard notch will come through. The final thing I do with this guitar, aside from working with this knob throughout the track, is the guitar is going from Blades into FX Aid, and to get a little bit of delay and reverb on it. And it starts pretty dramatically at the start with these kinds of tones. And as we go, I'll calm that down a little bit. That signal is going to get divided out into two different types of mixing. One is just going to be in veils, where it will get a sample added to it. The other one is actually going to be in the Kinks Logic, which I'll talk about later, and it's also going to be with another sample. So that's kind of how the guitar works, except we haven't talked about what the gate detection does. We've kind of talked about how Ears amplifies it, and then Blades provides some drive, as well as this wah-wah effect with the frequency. But there's also this gate detection circuit, which I'll plug in, which is actually going to be triggering beads up here. Oh, I forgot this needs to be plugged in. Excuse me. There we go. So this is really cool because now we can kind of have an accompaniment to the guitar. That basically will follow it along. And I can kind of choose at different points exactly how that accompaniment will play based on how I do emphases on the guitar part. So So it's nice, it adds like rather than trying to sequence this part of it, it adds this nice kind of organic accompaniment to the guitar to blend it a little bit more. What is going on here with Beads is it just has a frozen bit of this pad that's playing, frozen into it, and then I'm going to be kind of triggering the seed control here with the gate coming from the guitar. The other thing Beads is doing is it's going to be helping us mix the pad, and it's going to be helping with reverb. The output of Beads is just going directly into kind of the nearness panning module, and then out to HPO, and then to the zoom. So it's really not that complicated in terms of modulation or how this is set up. The main thing is that the guitar is going to be triggering that. So let's talk next about where this pad comes from, since it's kind of a voice that is tying together, Beads is kind of tying the pad and the guitar together. So let's talk about that next. Which, the pad sounds a little bit like this. Oh, and let me turn off the drums. And maybe at the start of this, let's take off the modulation here. So the way that this pad works is it's actually driven by tides. It's in kind of audio rate mode and in the division kind of multiplication mode, meaning that the 4 channels will have a mathematical ratio to them, 4 audio rate signals, which are going to be coming out into, I think, links down here to get blended together. I like blending the 1st and 3rd channel in one ear, kind of pan to one side, and the 2nd and 4th channel in the other ear, so they're almost like little power chords together. And if we don't send it any modulation, it just kind of outputs one droning signal. We're going to be using marbles to change the ratios between these outputs, and we're using PAMs to take these two mixed channels in blinds and do these types of attenuation to give them rhythm. So one of the really cool things I wanted to show in this breakdown was actually I'm using PAMs in a different way than I normally do. I've produced 4 different save files that are saving all 8 kind of patterns, and I use those to change the rhythm of the pad and the rhythm of the drums. So we'll probably zoom in, like punch in, and give you like a grainy kind of fuzzy version of this over there. But if we look at pattern A, and we see on channel 1, which is controlling blinds, attenuating these kind of 2 channels of the pad before they go into beads, we just have a divided by 4. We also, this will come later, but we're also doing the same thing to the drums over here. We're going to be changing their clock from 4 to different patterns as we go. So those will match what shows up here in PAMs. So if we go back and if you hold down, let me see if I can show you how to do this. If you go to the BPM and hold down the big knob, you can scroll to a save function, which saves, I think, 26 different save files of all of the channels. And you also have this load option. If you click load, you can actually have A here, B, C, and D for this patch are the ones that I've saved to. So if we load up B, we can kind of check out what's going on there. We see it's a ×1 instead of the divided by 4. And all I'm doing, I haven't actually changed any of the waveforms, any of the details of the outputs, just the division of them. So now we're going 4 times as fast just with the click of a button. We go back, do a long press here, and go to load. We can load up C, which you might be able to hear is now where we were originally divided by 4, then ×1, now we're ×2. And finally, we don't actually change the speed of the drums on every one of these, but we will do one more change on D, and importantly, it's also going to change, it's going to unmute channels 5 and 6. So we were kind of talking about this pad down here with tides, but I can't help but kind of interrupt it because PAMs is also controlling our samples with a Euclidean rhythm on channels 5 and 6. And all that's changing between these different save files is whether or not they are muted at the end of them. So I changed them from mute yes on ABC to mute no on D. And we get 2 Euclidean patterns out to the Disting NK4, which, make sure our drums are turned off, which then actually get summed and mixed with the guitar in Veils and then the guitar in Kinks. So these samples are kind of going to be panned and blended with the guitar that is being split in 2 from FX8. So this is actually really cool because normally I use something like Plancks to turn on and off my samples, but in this case, I can just go into PAMs and have these big dramatic changes to what I'm doing just through the load function. And throughout when I'm performing, all you have to do is click once and then scroll to the right save. So it's actually pretty easy. I'm pretty sure, at least for Euclideans going to a sampler, I'm gonna be controlling their on and off with PAMs from now on. So that was like a big lesson learned in this particular patch. The other thing going on with this pad while we're here is there's a ramp that I've designed here, kind of coming out from PAMs also, and the first two segments and stages are actually going to be sending this this ramp to both rings and tides to kind of get this filtering effect on these. And as I change to faster and faster patterns, that ramp doesn't change, so we're still keeping kind of a similar rhythm throughout the patch. So speaking of rings, since it's getting the same ramp, I might as well kind of do that one next. Let me see if I can, I think maybe the best thing to do would be to turn off the pad here. Let's turn off our gate so we don't accidentally trigger beads. And we'll look at what rings is doing next. So it's providing a kind of lead synth voice. Let's go ahead and turn this on. Plug it in. And so this is kind of a combination between Plancks and PAMs here to get this lead voice to come out. So first, it's just going to be these little panned blips. And as I change Plancks here, it's actually going to change and make these longer and longer. So how are these working? So first of all, we're just doing a monophonic signal coming out of rings, and it's in its third mode, the red mode. And it's just going into veils 3 and 4. And it's sending the same signal, both odd and even are the exact same here. So this panning effect that's happening, we can actually unplug it for a second. So this is the kind of melody coming out of rings. We're actually getting the melody here out of the X2 of marbles. X1 being used to change the chord on tides. And so what I wanted to do with this is actually try and simulate a kind of panning effect by sending the same signal to these two channels, but then attenuating them with the 4 last segments of stages. So here we have 2 other ramps, both in channels kind of 3 to 4 and then 5 to 6. How long they are is changing based on Plancks. So we can go from super short, where it's just a little blip, where they just basically fade in and immediately fade out when they're at 0, to a little bit more and more. And so these 2 kind of attack decay envelopes are actually coming from the T1 and T3 of marbles, which are used for the drums. So we'll do those next. So those will change as we speed up our patch as well. So if we went back to the slowest, we'd get a slightly different character of these of this lead part that will fade in by changing its envelopes rather than actually changing its volume in veils. So the final thing we want to look at here is the drums. So let me turn these off for a second, and we'll go back. Yeah, I think we're on the slowest here on PAMs. Let me just plug in the drums. I guess we can turn off. Let's listen to what the drums are doing kind of on their own. So it's this very slow, simple pattern coming out of marbles. And if you've seen the previous beat by beat videos, I do this, I think in all of them, a really similar setup using Plaits as my main drum module. And the way I do this is I send the X1 and 3 out of marbles, which this first bias knob in the T section of marbles is selecting different drum patterns. This one's a pretty simple drum pattern, almost like a bass kick, a snare kick, except it'll double the kick occasionally because it's tilted slightly. These gates are sent down to blinds. They're summed and sent to the model of plates to change which drum is being selected between the synthesized bass drum, synthesized snare drum, and synthesized hi-hat. The middle T, which is just going to be kind of a steady rhythm, is going to be the trigger of plates. And so when we speed this up, it's a little bit more obvious that we're gonna get this middle trigger, and then we'll sometimes get this kind of double bass. You might also start to hear, I think I can make this clearer. Oops, let's unplug these for a second. I think I can make this clear on a faster tempo. Using Plancks to speed up, let's see here. I think it's all the way over to the rate of marbles. Plancks has a feed. You can also hear that we're getting a little bit of FM synthesis, or actually, sorry, Voct to change the frequency of this. I actually have a big kind of web of modulation coming out of the 8th channel of PAMs, which is just going to be a ramp to help produce phrasing at the end. That's going to be changing the frequency of plates. It's going to be changing the position of rings to kind of change the way that those sounds happen at the end of each phrase. It's also going into, it looks like it's changing the sample a little bit. I think that's it. Maybe also changing the bias to do a little bit of a different drum pattern at the end of each space. So the other thing going on is the drums are going out into the first channel of blades, and I'm using the same patterns of snare and kick to change the resonance and the frequency to get a real snappy snare and a really deep bass hit. And because I'm positioning the guitar in this kind of low to mid range at the start, I wanted this to be a really subby bass, so it's pretty boomy. The guitar is taking up the second channel of FX8. The drums coming out of blades are taking up the first channel of FX8. So when we go super slow, we can still keep up the tempo even as it's a pretty slow beat. Almost like a little bit of a kind of like vaporwave texture, everything kind of slowed down, reverb with a little delay to keep up the rhythm. You can really hear those sub frequencies. So yeah, I think that's how all the sounds are being generated. Marbles acting as a kind of sequencer for both the rhythms and the melodies of our voices, which are plates for drums, rings for the lead sound, beads for the granular synthesis, tides for the pad, and then Disting MK4 for the samples, as well as the guitar going in, and blades kind of helping us to carve everything into their area, and then Plancks for kind of moving the song along, as well as PAMs. So let's try playing it really fast and see if we can put all this together with a little bit of narration of how specifically Plancks and PAMs work together with the changes of the main frequency knob in blades. So let's plug a few things back in. Don't want to forget. we want to start with the A pattern, but have B ready to go. And we want to start with quite a bit of effects and our frequency here. Let's also get back into the mood of this piece by turning our lights down again. All right, so let's try performing this patch. It might actually look a little bit different because after I performed and unplugged everything yesterday, I realized the camera wasn't recording, so I had to kind of repatch based on my patch notes. Luckily, they're really complete. And so we're gonna re-perform and then re-unpatch starting right now. We're starting with really simple guitar plucks. We'll build the rhythmic kind of intensity along with cams. But for now, the first change we're gonna make is bring the granular in. Resisting the urge to fiddle more with the guitar for now. So the next move is to go back to Pam's and change the rhythm. Here we go. And I want to adapt the guitar so I'm playing more notes now that the rhythm's increased. Then bringing in the lead. Start to hear that brassy patch from rings. Here's our next Pam's change. The guitar's a little lost, so let's bring it out by turning down the reverb and the delay. Here's those samples. Before we make the big change, we're the most intense with the guitar. Here we go. Okay, so a little bit clunky with the change. Sounds good. Get the guitar tone changed a little bit. Maybe raise this a little bit. Back to the slow. Then we slow everything down at the end. Bring the guitar tone up even higher because we're going to be doing some harmonics here. Bring back in the reverb and delay. We're going to play beats a little bit here while increasing the reverb. Has this really lush reverb that we can build here. almost to full reverb at this point. One more repetition. And we can even increase the delay and reverb on FX8 now. Everything's getting a little bit smoothed out. Let's crank it all the way. Want everything to kind of be super dreamy at the end. Here we go. Let it all kind of fade out. So I messed up a little bit on this knob at the end. This is pretty fun. There are notches in the pitch of beads, so when you play it, you can find those octaves, fifths, thirds, seconds. There's a bunch that you can kind of figure out in here to play over and over again. And that's the end of this patch. So now we're really gonna start to unplug, hopefully for the last time. Wait, should I check if I'm still recording before I do this? Yeah, we're good. Sad to see this one go. I've had it in my rack for a really long time. It's a super fun patch to play. You can start to see down here, we didn't talk about it during the patch, but I have the outputs going all to Nearness, which is probably like the hardest working module in my setup. There's 2 HP for like this huge panning mixer with some volume control. And then that goes straight into HPO, and then out into the Zoom for recording. I think I'll probably do a video on mastering for what happens once I have this track out of the Zoom, because I'm just capturing everything as just a stereo track, and then I do a few little out-of-the-box things to it to process it, filter it, things like that. So maybe I'll do a little video on that process as well.